All right, welcome everybody to another edition of What Drives You. I am one of the co-hosts, Stan Windhorn, and with me, as always, is my good buddy and co-host, Carl Bauer. What's up, Carl?
How are you, Stan? Thanks everybody for joining us again for this episode. I think we're up to number 54, and we have a super
Whoa.
special guest with us.
Yeah,
Miss
you've been telling me a lot about our guest today, and I'm looking forward to hearing his story.
Yes, yes. So we have with us today Mr. Tim Jackson from Colorado, but today he is reporting live from. He's our correspondent from Montreal, Canada. So welcome, Mr. Tim.
Good to be with you, Stan and Carl, and look forward to catching up.
Yes. So last time I saw Tim, we were at a big party at NADA in Las Vegas. That's the National Automobile Dealer Association. And Tim was sort of kind of on his book tour. So we'll get to his book probably towards the end of the episode. But Tim, how did you get, I met Tim before I asked that question. I met Tim through an old company of mine called Dealer Fire. And Stan, I think you may remember them. They were one of the premier hot property web developers in the auto space, and then were acquired by Dealer Socket. But I kept hearing about this guy, Tim Jackson, who was so helpful to our young startup and all we did because we sponsored some of their events and then finally got to meet him. And Stan, you've got big hands and a big grip. This is one of the firmest handshakes you'll ever get, and just energy, like it's like it transfers from Tim. So Tim, thank you for that. And it was fun memories. But how did you get into automotive, and then how long were you in automotive all through your career with Colorado Dealer Association?
Sure. Well, I had an automotive service center early on in my career, and now I'm a native of Missouri. I'm a small town Missourian, and I did that automotive operation for 10 years. And then I got into association management, and also in Missouri. And that was first with the JCs, Junior Chamber of Commerce, and later with that was the state JCs, later with the national JCs. And then I came to Colorado in 1997 with the National Federation of Independent Business, and got back into automotive 7 years later at the Colorado Automobile Dealers Association. And there was one other, two other connections there early on. One, my father-in-law was a Ford dealer in Northwest Missouri, so I never really worked in his dealership, but I was in and around the dealership and connected to it through family. So I was always abreast of what was going on in automotive on the retail side. And then I mentioned the JCs. The first executive vice president of the Missouri JCs position I had starting in 1987. The very first one, who started way back in 1955, went on to be the Missouri Auto Dealers Association president from 1960 to 1992. And he grew up about 33 miles from me, and 32 to be exact. And then he was in that role for 32 years, and he lived another 32 years after he left that role. He was a rep for Northwood University and connecting with dealer associations. So he was really one of my mentors in both automotive and association management. By the way, his name is Ralph Taberlow, and Ralph and the Missouri Auto Dealers Association was really a training ground, almost a proving ground for auto association execs that went to Arkansas and Kentucky and Georgia and Orange County, California, and Kansas and others. So he had a very long reach through mentorship and education and I guess launch progress. And I was never worked directly for him, but I was certainly influenced by him. And he just passed away last year, so 32 years after he retired from the Auto Dealers Association. So that was my connection to get into the auto dealers. And and into the industry, and I love the industry. It's during those 18 years at the Missouri, I'm sorry, during those 18 years at the Colorado Auto Dealers Association, I would also produce the Denver Auto Show. And now it's called the Colorado Auto Show, but I produced that show. And actually, that show, this may surprise you both, being in and around the industry and close to auto shows. The Denver Auto Show actually dates all the way back to 1902, and there's
Wow.
only two auto shows that predate Denver's. Those are the New York Auto Show in New York City, which started in 1900, and the Chicago Auto Show in Chicago, Illinois, that started in 1901. And a lot of people are surprised about that because, where was Detroit and LA, some of the bigger shows? Detroit and LA shows both started in 1907. So Denver had 5 years on Detroit and LA's auto shows, and and then if you put yourself back in that era, that meant that Denver's auto show really started before any of the brands in the market today, including Cadillac and Lincoln and Ford and Chevrolet, Dodge and Chrysler, and or international brands like Toyota and Honda. So the Denver Auto Show has a long history and a long reach, and it was an honor to produce that show.
Wow. Yeah, that Stan, I told you he's like an encyclopedia. This could have been like a 3 hour broadcast because of his knowledge and experience. But yeah, I knew Chicago was an old one because I'm right here and I've been to it many times. But Stan, have you ever met somebody in an industry who just they're in their industry, they love their job, but they are like the shining star example for like dealer associations? That's this guy because he is just not only is he support and promote his state dealer association, but man, he's interconnected with everybody around the country. So just a great connection to have and just super, you know, pro dealer and just a wealth of knowledge. So
Yeah.
great story.
Well, you
Well, thanks.
probably ran into a mutual acquaintance. I'm assuming a gentleman named Pat Watson.
Oh yeah, Pat is a friend of mine, and I knew Pat. Of course, I knew him during his time at TrueCar, but he had 38 years of
Yeah.
service at the South Carolina Auto Dealers Association. So he was my counterpart in South Carolina. And then when he left that and went to TrueCar, and TrueCar was working with dealer associations because of compliance. You remember the whole drill. So
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
worked with me and the Colorado Auto Dealers. Um, and Scott Painter, he arranged a trip with Scott Painter to come into Denver because uh, TrueCar was shut down in Colorado for a while and they were relaunching. So he brought
Okay.
Scott Painter, or came with Scott Painter into Denver. I met him and met Scott. I talked to Scott before on the phone, but I never met him in person. And I met him at the Four Seasons, had a head to head, face to face, intense discussion. It was productive, very productive, of course. But on
Yeah.
that trip, by the way, just ironically, and because it was very memorable for me, there was another party that they flew in with. And I don't know if, Stan, if you remember that trip, but they flew with Elon Musk and Elon Musk's jet because Elon was coming to Denver for his brother Kimball's. Kimball lives in Boulder, Colorado, and he
Yeah.
has restaurants, and he was doing a restaurant launch event, and Elon was a guest of honor at the restaurant launch, and so was Scott Painter, and then the restaurant launch became an event to bring automotive into back into TrueCar, a local automotive.
Nice. Yeah, for listeners right now, Scott Painter is the gentleman who started TrueCar, which is how Carl and I became friends. And at least at that time, Scott Painter and Elon Musk were kind of running buddies. They were friends. I don't know if that's still the case or not, but I want to share with you one real quick story. I think it might have been the first time I ever met Pat, but Pat was an interesting guy to get up in front of a room and start talking to us. But when Pat was first brought on to TrueCar, we're all sitting in this room, and he handed out to each one of us uh, a, a thing of chapstick that said True Car on it. And we're like, why in the world are you handing out chapstick? He goes, well, I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to have to start kissing some butts for a little while because True Car wasn't that popular with the car dealers then. And I thought that was hysterical. But that was a great
I
introduction to Pat and
remember
his
that too.
personality.
Yeah. Pat
Yeah,
was
ask Pat
hilarious.
about the chapstick.
Yeah. Pat is hilarious. He really is. I haven't talked to him in a while, but and I think he's fully retired now, but yeah, he's a genuine individual and was always a good friend.
Yep, good guy.
So Tim, you transitioned from 18 years of Colorado, and to be honest with you, you're still so active. I didn't even know. I knew you had talked about retirement, but I didn't actually know you were officially, and you're doing still a lot of like emeritus or whatever. But what are you doing now?
I'm right now. I mean, the reason I'm in, you said I'm still active, and I am very active. I'm at the Association of the Auto Dealer Association, so the ATAE's Automotive Trade Association Executives Annual Conference, which is in Montreal this year, and um, and that's the event I have this evening. I've been here since came in on Tuesday. Their meeting started on with the auto shows actually on Monday. I arrived Tuesday and I've been at a lot of their reception and social events since then. And but yeah, I've never really disconnected, and I don't plan to disconnect with the industry because I do have the book out, and I know we're going to talk about that later. But the book really chronicles the past, present, and future of personal mobility in general, and starting with the earliest bicycles, motorcycles, airplanes, and cars in the earliest days, back in those late 1800s, early 1900s, and goes all the way forward to the present and debunks a lot of myths about the present, by the way, and and goes into the future. And the future includes, of course, as you all know, watching the industry as you do, to fully autonomous cars, and which are becoming reality now, without a doubt, and and even flying cars. And most people don't know that flying cars are going to be a reality, but they really are. And I moved from a skeptic to a believer. So I'm I know we're going to talk about that later, but I'll throw that in there because it's really what I'm doing today is helping educate the public. I'm on a mission really to help inform the public both um, how good the industry is today, really. I mean, from many standpoints that the industry is criticized for, the industry in many cases, maybe not always, deserves commendation versus criticism. And that's the debunking of the myths and the um, correcting many urban legends, but also the very exciting future we have in personal mobility um, when it becomes aerial. Traffic congestion will be a thing of the past if you can rise above it.
Yeah, I love that.
I can't wait to talk about the future with you, Tim. But one of the things that I'm kind of a history buff, and there's some shows on the History Channel, like the Cars That Built America kind of a thing, and I was surprised that several car dealers or car manufacturers started off like in the bicycle business. I
You,
think Honda might have been in the bicycle business first, or I
well,
don't remember
several.
exactly, but
That's in the book. You're exactly right, and that's in. I've done 162 presentations on this, Stan, and that really is where the presentation begins. People like Carl Benz of Mercedes Benz fame, and
yeah,
in Germany was a bike tech before he was a car guy. And then
yeah.
you have, of course, Henry Ford. Henry Ford worked for the Detroit Bicycle Company in Detroit, Michigan, before he started Ford Motor Company in Dearborn, Michigan, and actually started it in Detroit and later moved to Dearborn. But the Rains Molds was a bike tech. David Buick was a bike tech. A lot of those. Oh, and then I mentioned airplanes because their aircraft industry was starting simultaneously, whereas I like to say not only simultaneously, but at the same time as the auto industry. And you have Orville and Wilbur Wright over in Dayton, Ohio. They were bike techs, of course, before they were airplane guys. I started to say car guys. What I didn't know until I was doing the research on the book, they also had a car dealership in Dayton, Ohio. I don't think most people know that. Everybody knows they were bike techs, and they built the plane that created the first flight in Kitty Hawk,
Yeah.
the famous Kitty Hawk flight. Everybody knows that, but they don't know necessarily much about the fact that they were bike techs and they had a car dealership in Dayton, Ohio.
I did not know that. That is super fascinating. I also know, or I think I know, that Ford started building planes pretty quickly after being in the auto manufacturing business, and he jumped in early. Or one of his sons, I guess his son might have been the driving force behind getting into the airplane manufacturing. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's three, and they can be long stories, but I'll try to make them short stories. The first story on Henry Ford and aviation was he was really focused. He had his head to the ground and where he needed it on getting his cars produced in volume and making them affordable and creating the assembly line process and all of that. But he also um, he was fascinated by aviation, and in 19 so he started before he started Ford Motor Company. He actually started the Henry Ford Company, and the Henry Ford Company, he had a partner by the name of Henry Leland, Leland, a business partner, but it was called Henry Ford Company. And they were building what would later become Cadillac. Okay, but Henry Ford and Henry Leland had a falling out before they got the first car produced. One of them had to leave, so it was Henry Ford that left. Well, the name of the company was Henry Ford, so Henry Leland had to change the name of the company. So he changed it to Cadillac. And because it was based in Detroit, and the first was named after the founder of Detroit, who was a French explorer who founded Detroit, and the first mayor of Detroit, and that was
Mm.
Cadillac. And that's where Cadillac came from. So then, um, uh, back on to your more specific to your questions, but so Henry Ford was fascinated by aviation, and in 1917 he decided he needed a plane of his own. So, well, where do you buy a plane? Where does Henry Ford buy a plane in 1917? The industry is not very well built out yet, so he goes to the original plane guys, Orville and Wilbur Wright, and calls them up and says, "I want to buy a plane." So Wilbur Wright literally flew from Dayton, Ohio, up to Dearborn, Michigan, to deliver Henry Ford a plane. And then, of course, he said, "Well, Mr. Ford, you're going to have to take lessons and learn to fly this." And Henry Ford said, "No, I won't." He said, "I'm going to hire a professional to fly me." He was smart that way, by the way. And then
Yeah.
I said so that's the first story. Then their second is um, they did start building planes, had an airplane division or whatever, but in its early days, it had a lot of claims how fast it would go, and how slick it would operate and everything. And it was um, they were just getting that, no, I guess pun intended here, just getting that off the ground. But they had a couple of serious accidents. And in fact, the business partner that was working to get his aviation business off the ground was actually killed in an accident off the coast of Florida. And so that they shut down the aviation business. Now, but the third connection with Ford and aviation, and this was um, you'll know a lot of this from from your automotive history, that auto manufacturers pretty much shut down production during World War One and World War Two, and so they could build military equipment. And what the
Right.
military needed most was airplanes. And so a lot of the automotive factories became airplane factories, and and so one well, probably more than one, but one just outside of Detroit, one of Ford's factories became a manufacturing facility for the U.S. military cause, and Ford led that effort.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's back when the whole country would band together and participate in the war effort, whether they were actually holding a rifle or back home. Everybody sacrificed. That was a great time and unity of our country for sure.
Yeah, and the war bonds. Remember that the war bonds was a big campaign to support the country during the war. Buy the war bonds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people were called on to do that.
I when he first told me, Stan, about the book that he's writing, which kind of is a nice segue here into the book, what I thought, okay, that's kind of crazy. I got all the history, and there's some cool ties even with Thomas Edison and Ford and way back, just all the creativity that those inventors had and those pioneers. But since that meetings, when you told me about the book, Tim, I have seen so many variations of flying cars and flying personal mobility. I'm like, he's like a prophet. He knows and sees it. So anyway, tell us about how that came around, the idea for the book. The history of it is unbelievable. So we'll share where we can, our viewers can find and buy that book. Probably Amazon is the easiest one, I would guess. But how that came to be, and then what, like, who's producing it? How much interest have you got? Because obviously you're out there sharing this news. You've already done these 160 some presentations on it. But it's fascinating to me that it's actually going to be probably reality much sooner than we think.
Right, right. Well, and there's a lot to unpack there. So let me build into your question was how did I get into the book or the concept? Really, during my 18 years in the Auto Dealer Association, I was the face of the auto industry largely in Colorado, and therefore the defender of the industry when there was a problem out there, a social or a societal problem with cars. Everybody remembers the unintended acceleration for Toyota, and for example, or um, the VW emissions gate scandal, where they had the emission control devices that were passing the test, but they couldn't keep those on all the time. So anyway, but overall, the industry is very good. And I said they probably may deserve some criticism in some places, but let me give you just a few quick examples, or I'll try to make them quick. One is emissions. Okay, the industry is criticized for vehicle emissions, and we all want zero emissions, and that's what the industry and the government and the public all wants to work toward. But most people don't realize that on actual emissions, there's two types of emissions. One's the brown cloud emissions, and one's the carbon emissions. But on the brown cloud emissions, those are the ozone-inducing, asthma-creating, and brown cloud forming emissions. New cars today, whether they're gasoline, diesel, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or electric, are all 99% cleaner on that type of tailpipe emissions. Everything that's sold in a showroom today, you don't have to buy an electric car, but everything that's sold in a showroom today is 99% cleaner than anything available in 1972. So between 72 and 2022, we've reduced it 99%. Some may say, oh, well, that must be an exaggeration. It couldn't possibly be 99%. By some studies, it's as much as 99.7. We'll just go the conservative number and say 99. Okay. Now on carbon emissions, those are the emissions that get most supply today. The carbon emissions are the CO2 or climate change. Greenhouse gas emissions they're often called as well. We're not 99% better as an industry on those, but we are about 28% better just in the past 10 years, not 50 years, but 10 years. And that's a component of two things. One is much better fuel economy, even on the gas and diesel engines. There's not as many diesel engines, but mostly gas engines now. And secondly, electrification. Now, some want us to electrify everything, and that may happen over time. It hasn't happened yet. It's happening pretty fast in some states like Colorado and California, but Other states, not so much. But just on the electrification that's been done, it's created a 28% improvement in carbon emissions. And so most people don't know that. There's a chapter in the book on that. We can move on to another one. Traffic fatalities. Traffic fatalities hit 52,000. And by the way, we'd all like to have a vision zero and no traffic fatalities, right? But and by the way, let me jump ahead on one thing on commercial aviation, because on Where's My Flying Car, this is the intersection of automotive and aviation. But on commercial aviation, until that accident that we all heard about in Washington, D.C. in January, we had gone 15 years and with zero, it was a goose egg, zero commercial aviation fatalities here in the USA. Most people don't know that because we don't talk about it, because you never see it, and never happens. But so aviation is much ahead of automotive on fatalities. Automotive, frankly, is way ahead of aviation on emissions. So both industries are striving to get better on both. But back on the fatalities, we had 52,000 in 1972. That happened to be the same year that seatbelts were required to be added in all vehicles. And so seatbelts have been there in every vehicle built since then. Traffic fatalities have declined to about 42,000. Well, that's only about 20%. We always just hear that number, the 52 or the 42. We hear the static number. What we don't hear is between 1972 and 2022, vehicle miles traveled, the collective vehicle miles traveled in the US of A increased 300%. It went from 1.1 trillion to 3.3 trillion, an increase of 300%, even while we've decreased fatalities 20%. So let's put the number in perspective as we talk about it, because we all want to get that number down. And to be fair, it was down a little more in 2024. It was down to 39,000. So it's going in the right direction. Part of what the problem on fatalities today is putting bicycles and pedestrians and cars all in the same spaces, because the fatalities that are up are bicycle and pedestrian related as they relate to motor vehicles. So that's a public policy issue. Let me say one third thing, and that's one on vehicle quality. So everybody wants new cars to be high quality. I can tell you the industry is doing a much better job on that than most people realize, or that the industry gets credit for. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to give you one tangible, I guess, factoid to point to the vehicle quality. The average age of the fleet 25 years ago, and Carl, you probably know this from your studies and research, was the average age of the fleet 25 years ago was 8.4 years. The average age of the fleet is now 13 years. And that's the average. So just in the last 25 years, we've increased the average age of the fleet by 50%. And I was often asked, Tim, why do people keep their cars so long? And I always had a 3-word answer, and it was a very basic answer, but it's they can. So you guys and I are old enough to remember when a car with 100,000 miles on it was deemed very little value to gift to a friend or relative or to trade in at a dealership. It was almost worn out. It was very little value. Today, a car with 100,000 miles on it is barely broke in. It will still have maybe somewhere around 40 to 60% of its original value. So all of that is a testament to the vehicle quality. And before I go off that, let me give you one other, that's one tangible, the average age of the fleet. But another one is the percentage of repair work, ROs, if you will, in dealerships that are paid by the manufacturer under warranty versus paid by consumers after warranty. A dealer in the Denver Metro tracked that from the time he went in business in 1990, and 60% of their service department business, 60% was billed to the manufacturer for warranty. That number dropped every year that dealer was in business for the next 30 years. And what did it drop to? It dropped to 15%. That meant that 85% was customer paid. And And that's not even apples and apples comparison, because as the vehicles got better, the manufacturers put longer warranties on them, right? So the new car warranty covers more, lasts longer, is more protective, more beneficial for consumers today. And yet it doesn't, and yet most of the repairs in dealerships are customer pay because they're out of warranty. So, and that's only because they keep them, so they can keep them so much longer. So why do people keep their cars so long? It's the three-word answer: because they can. It's a testament to the vehicle quality, um, as is the average age of the fleet. So those three things um, are really getting better, but you don't hear they're getting better because you just hear about how bad it is today. And well, it's actually much better than it used to be. There's one thing that's not getting better, and that's traffic congestion. And traffic congestion is obviously it's we are our own worst enemy. People like our cars so much, everybody wants to drive them. Everybody wants to hit the streets with them, and when they do, they fill up the streets. So the only way we can ever get rid of traffic congestion, and this is really more of the conversation, big picture for societal issues going forward. We can only build so many lanes, as much as I'd like for all roads to be like the 405 out of LA with 12 lanes in each direction. There's just not the real estate to do that in most places. So at some point in time, if we're going to get people from point A to point B, we're either going to have to take them underground through tunnels, or we're going to have to take them aerial through through flying cars or flying vehicles. And I really think that is that's what's going to drive this new industry and help it stand.
I think if you, I mean, that was a lot to unpack there. Holy cow! I told you, Stan, we're going to get an education here today. And which again, why I would encourage anyone to buy the book, read the book, because it is an amazing history of vehicles, right, and mobility. But
Can we say the name of the book for everybody?
oh,
We haven't
It's
said the name of the book
Dude,
yet.
Where's My Flying Car?
Ah, I love it.
Yeah. And then it's got a subtitle: A Fascinating Look at the Past. That's your history, Stan. Present, and incredible future of personal mobility.
and I'll try it, Tim, when maybe after when we wrap up, I'll get a link to wherever, either your website or to Amazon, wherever
Yeah.
you think is the best deal for the customers. I'll put that in the description so that they can just link from there. But I remember you said something that hit home to me, which was, the length of the warranty. Like when my folks were buying car, I think they got like a 12/12 or something. I mean, if they
Yeah.
got that when they were buying cars back in the 70s, late 60s.
Right. No, it's warranties are so much better today. And some brands, I won't mention brands, but you know who they are,
Yeah.
have the $100,000 warranty. And some of them had to do that because of quality issues, but they have done it, and it's been protective of consumers.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
I'd really like to get into the flying car thing if we could. And I have
Well,
two questions. But go ahead, Carl. What were you going to say?
no, I was going to say perfect segue where Tim was going. So ask your question, Stan.
Okay. First of all, even on the cover of your book, which is a great title, by the way, it looks the picture you have on it looks very much like a drone. And so I guess my question is that where flying cars are going to be? Are they going to be sort of like big drones? And how much has the impact? I mean, drones haven't been around that long, but they're everywhere now, and there's so many different kinds. So did the drone industry really propel what will, the flying car thing, and will they be sort of like drones?
You are really, I got to hand it to Stan here, Carl, because he first brought up bicycles and cars. Because in my presentation, my very first image is bicycles and cars and airplanes and motorcycles, because bicycles were precursors to all. But the drones, you're exactly 100% correct, spot on. The drones are the precursor to the flying cars. And you also mentioned drones are everywhere. Drones are being used societally, or let's say from a societal standpoint, are being used in all new use cases around the world, and they're benefiting society in for most of the public in many unknown ways. I'll give you just some example, and some of these are in my presentation that I've done 162 presentations on the book, and all of those have a section on drones, because the drones are the precursor to the flying cars. So drones are being used. Drones are replacing, in most cities, a lot of communities, replacing the fireworks show. So instead of going to fireworks on 4th of July or having a fireworks show on New Year's Eve, they're using drone shows. And drones, and they're as entertaining as the fireworks, maybe more entertaining, because they can configure them for an American flag, a waving flag, a river, a patriot, whatever they want to configure them as. But beyond just entertainment, drones are being used for medical purposes, medical recoveries, medical deliveries, medical device deliveries. They're being used by police departments, for law enforcement, for investigation, or let's say surveillance. They're being used now in places like the Congo. They're sending drones in to deliver medical devices where they can't even get cars, trains, buses, planes, any other way to get there. They can get drones there. And but now for how that relates to the flying car, yes, I would say you're very intuitive, and you take that picture on the cover of the book. It looks like a drone. It is really the technical name for the flying cars. The name is they are VTOLs, VTOL. That's a very clunky acronym, but and then you put a lowercase e in front of it. It stands for Electric Vertical Takeoff and Landing Vehicles. So they take off and land like a helicopter,
Right.
but the difference between them, there's differences, but I would say this: they are more like a helicopter than they are like a car. So let's get that on the table up front. They're more like a helicopter than they are like a car. But I was asking a presentation in Phoenix at the Biltmore. A guy at a lunch meeting said, "Tim, I see what you're talking about, these passenger drones, these VTOLs, but we already have helicopters. Why do we need them?" And I said, well, and this is where they get better than helicopters. Okay. I said, if you can imagine coming into the Biltmore here today for lunch in a helicopter, if you were landing the helicopter at the Biltmore at 3 o'clock in the morning, you've woke everybody up in the resort. And if you're landing at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you shut everybody up for a 3 block radius, because they're really noisy and they're very wind disruptive. So the first difference between these and a helicopter is a helicopter, of course, has a big jet engine and one big prop. These have small electric engines. They're all battery electric, and then multiple props. And they have props anywhere from 6 to 8. One company has designed theirs with 18 props. So what the multiple props creates redundancy, and redundancy creates safety. Because then if you lose a prop on a helicopter, you're down, right? We all know
That's
that.
it. Yep.
If you lose a prop on one of these, you still have 17 or 16, or if you only started with 8, you still have 7 or 6. So you can still get in and down. The second difference is, instead of the jet engine, they have batteries. That makes them emission free, but it also makes them much quieter. And the third difference, there's really 4 differences. So the third difference is a helicopter prop is always in the same position. So when it gets in the air and wants to go forward, the whole helicopter leans, right? It rotates. But the props rotate. So the term is transition. So they transition in the air. You take off, when you take off vertically, the props are horizontal. And when you get in the air and you want to go horizontal, the props go vertical. So they transition. So it flies through the air like an airplane. And that brings us to the fourth difference. Helicopters don't have wings. Most of these have wings. So the wings do 2 things. They help balance it and create stability in the air. But they also, wings are the best thing about a wing on an airplane is that they create lift, of course, and they carry the weight of the vehicle better. So 90% of the weight of the vehicle in an airplane is carried by the wings. So these have wings. Those are the 4 differences. And yes, drones are the precursor to the flying cars. And some will call them, and I think you were kind of alluding to this, Sam, but some will call them passenger drones, and essentially they are.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is going to be an important question, and I don't know. I got to think somebody's thinking about this. But you had just said one thing that's gotten worse when it comes to automobiles is congestion. So we either got to go under or we got to go above. What do you anticipate, or do you know if there's already talk about right now? Everybody's not every, a lot of people are taking to the air in these flying drones. Are they going to be following the highways and the streets, or are they just going to be going wherever as the crow flies, as they say? What's your thoughts on how people are going to get from point A to point B, and how do they keep control? There's not going to be an air traffic controller keeping everybody aware of each other. So what do you anticipate, that everybody's going to fly along the existing roadways just above them?
Yeah, well, there's two things, or maybe there's several things to unpack, and I'll try to do this quick, but or throw them in there quick. So the FAA, of course, controls the airspace, and the
Hmm.
FAA, and I was there when the FAA administrator signed into law a new regulation that will govern both drones and the VTOLs, and that was done. That regulation was signed at the National Business Aviation Association conference in Las Vegas, Nevada, October 22 last year. And by the way, I signed, this was a fluke on this. I signed up for that conference just because I wanted to see the aviation aspect of aerial mobility, but I didn't know that reg was going to be signed. So that was the luck of the luck of my visit there. But he said, the FAA administrator said, as he signed that into law, he said, this is the first new regulation. No, let me reword that a little bit. This is the first new aircraft designation, type aircraft designation the FAA will regulate in over 80 years. So if you go back
Wow.
80 years, you've got airplanes and helicopters. And so now, after 80 years, this reg is going to do both drones and VTOLs. And by the way, I said VTOL is a clunky name. I still hate to use it, but it is what it is. But the more industry term and regulatory term is advanced air mobility, and the acronym for that is AAM. And then under advanced air mobility, there's going to be two types. We haven't got to that yet, so we need to get this on the table. Two types of these flying drones or uh, flying cars. One will be the kind that you or I and Carl, Stan, and Tim could all buy. We could land in our driveway. We could park in our garage. And some of them are small enough we could throw them in the back of an F-150 or a Ram pickup and take them to the mountains or to the beach. And if you want to look these up, the best way to do it is just go to YouTube and type in Jetson One. And Jetson One, they're flying their vehicles. I want one of them, by the way. But they weigh in at 190 pounds. They're battery electric. They have 8 props, two on each of the four corners, and they fly at speeds of up to 60 hour, and they have a range of 80 to 90 miles. Again, you can land in your driveway, park in your garage at 190 pounds. You could throw it in the back of an F-150 and take it to the mountains. So why wouldn't we want one of those, or maybe two or three? But by the way, Jetson One, they're built in Italy, and but they've had more orders out of the U.S. than any place else in the world. So they plan to build a second factory in the U.S. They've had so many orders for the Jetson One that the order bank is booked out till 2027 or 2028. Um,
Wow.
and everybody wants to know what the cost is. The cost when they were originally pricing these was 195,000, and I just saw last week. I haven't verified this, but they've dropped the price to about 97,000. But we all remember when flat panel TVs came out, and flat panel TVs. First one we bought was $4,000. It was
Yeah.
55-inch TV. We replaced it after 25 years for under $400, and it's a better TV. So just like any other technology, once they're out for a while, the price will come down. The other
I,
type, so that's
Hey,
the personal.
hey, Tim, I want to give, sorry, but I would just want to give, and pun intended, props
Okay.
to Jetson One for picking the name Jetson. For
Oh
maybe some
yeah.
of our younger viewers, that was a cartoon that we all grew up with, this futuristic cartoon where they flew around in cars. So,
Do you know the Jetsons on TV? I'm glad you said that. The Jetsons on TV was it was on ABC in 1962. They only produced 28 episodes, but the
Really?
Jetsons on TV still is syndicated today, and it's still the most syndicated show on television in history. And
That's
so
awesome.
I was 5 years old I'm going to date myself here. I was 5 years old in 1962, but of course I remember the Jetsons. But every 5-year-old today knows the Jetsons because they've all seen it on TV
Awesome.
in
All
syndication.
right. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there, but we were talking about how we're all going to do this safely. Do we all
Yeah,
do are we flying over the highways?
yeah.
How do we avoid all the power lines and all that stuff?
Um, Well, and that's a very fair question, and let me try to go to that more directly. Sorry, I wasn't trying to detour around it, but there's a lot to
That's all right.
unpack. But the so that regulation, I've got the regulation out there, but the FAA will regulate them. And let me go hark back on the concept of the drones in the formation in a fire, 4th of July show. You have 300 drones in the air and 300 drones interacting with each other. And it's not a static image, they're moving. So they move. So you can have a dragon, the year of the dragon 2024, and you have a dragon image in South Korea or China because it's the year of the Asian dragon. And you can see the dragon moving and they stay in formation. So that's all done. I'm going to tell you something, Stan and Carl, instinctively, you already know this, but I'm going to tell you something you already know. There's not pilots up in there flying those. They're all interacting autonomously, if you will. If we can do it autonomously with drones and keep them apart, when you have 300 drones in a very short and very small configuration, we can configure all the passenger drones for the foreseeable future similarly, and make sure you don't have to fly them autonomously. Although some of these, we haven't got to that yet, but some of these are being built so they will fly autonomously from the start. But most of them will be pilot driven, at least initially. But still, the air traffic controls will control the ones that are commercially used, and that's the other one we haven't got to. And that's called one is called the personal aviation vehicles, passenger drones. The other is called um, urban air mobility, and that urban air mobility that is AKA flying taxis or air taxis. And folks, I need to put this in here. This is what has moved me from a skeptic to a believer on this industry, and from the basic question of if it's going to happen to the more immediate question of when. And it's because of where the money is coming from. And there's three distinct industries that are funneling basically and heavily investing in these. One is aircraft manufacturers, and that includes Boeing, Airbus, Bell Helicopter, and Embraer out of Brazil. The second is airlines, and that includes United, Delta, American, JetBlue, and Southwest. And the third is, and this is where it gets closer to home, automakers, and that includes Honda and Hyundai and Toyota and Mercedes and BMW and VW and Audi and even Stellantis. And then they're cross investing. So you have some of the top companies are getting investment from the aircraft manufacturers, airlines, and automakers in the same startup. So that's moved me from a skeptic to a believer, because these industries don't have that kind of money that they just want to throw it away. They have a reason. They have an end game on this industry, and that's where it gets to use cases. It's going to come back around to how they'll be controlled. So it's a long way around here, Stan, but I'm going to get back to your control. United Airlines, first use case for the urban air mobility, the air taxi, is New York City, and it's from downtown New York City, from say what would be the helipads. Now they've just recently changed the name. By the way, this is anticipating the flying car, from the helipads of downtown New York City to Newark, which is United's Eastern hub. And I
Hmm.
was out there for the New York Auto Show in April and took a Uber from the Jacob Javits Center out to the Newark, and it was an hour. It's only 16 miles, but it was an hour and 15 minutes and $90, right? we've probably all done that at some point in time. Now, if you're doing that in a flying taxi, you will go and one of your comments, Stan, was the way the crow flies, and that's exactly right. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So that air taxi is not going to have any of that restrictions and problems getting me to the airport that my Uber had. There's no Lincoln Tunnel. There's no on ramps, off ramps, accidents, lane changes, slowdowns, standstills.
Stop
It,
lights, stop signs.
yeah, all that. It's all
Yeah,
direct. And you know that hour and 15-minute ride in the Uber will be an 8 to 9 minute flight in an air taxi.
I
And
love
that's
it.
you can see why United wants to do it. And but now let me come back to the control. Because I wasn't dodging your question, but I wanted to put more vision out there of how they'll actually work and come back to the control. So I'm getting all these Google alerts on this industry. And earlier today, the new Secretary of Transportation under the Trump administration, guy by the name of Sean Duffy, just announced that you've heard that they're planning a new air traffic control system technology. The technology that the FAA uses today to control flights is it's 60 years old, right? So it needs to be replaced. This is like running our computers today on the old COBOL system that computers started out with. So it needs to be replaced. It's going to be a 38 billion with the B $1 billion project. But under that, it will have the capabilities of air traffic control for both drones and the VTOLs, the flying cars, and uh, they're going to be it's going to be so scientific and let's say so exact, so perfect science that they're going to get to where it's going to be impossible to get them together in the air because they're going to be programmed to stay apart, to stay safe. And now something you'd also said, and I want to come back to it because I heard it and I wasn't dodging any of this, but you said, "Oh, will they follow roads?" I actually think that we're going to get to the point that they will follow roads more than what they originally are thinking now, what the industry is thinking now. And part of that, I made a trip to Washington on June the 3rd of this year to meet with the FAA and to get a briefing from the FAA on where they're at on this whole urban air mobility thing and the technology, and also to tell them what I'm doing out here. And so they knew that I'm out here preaching the gospel, kind of, so to speak. And one of the things that was talked about in that meeting, it was a meeting in the AAM office, the Advanced Air Mobility office. And one of the things that I said, well, you remember when the drones, everybody in New Jersey was concerned. They didn't know what the drones were, right? And the FAA rep, and I don't want to mention any names here or get anybody in trouble, but she said, well, Tim, in Texas, they shoot down drones. People don't like them flying over their property, so they shoot them down. Well, we're going to have to get beyond that, and it may be a tough time getting beyond it, but I want to be a part of helping get beyond that because overall, these are going to be problem solvers, not problem creators. But there are some challenges that we'll have to navigate, and I think
Sure.
back to your comment on the roads, I think one of the more logical ways, and let's say, um, I know you're in Texas, right, Stan?
Yeah, Austin.
Austin. So Austin has traffic problems, right? I read about it.
Oh yeah.
Austin, they're rail to get more people into town on public transit and all that, but serious traffic congestion. Well, if you
Yep.
just take if the shortest distance from downtown Austin to the airport is a straight line, but it may be that straight line, they may need to alter that a little bit and just follow the roads. They'll be flying a lot faster than the cars on the roads. But by going over the roads, they're not going to be going over backyards and factories and elementary schools and all that, and where our farms. So they may need to follow the roads. It may add a minute or two to the journey, but it might be a much safer way to do that. So I think there will be routes that will include flying over the roads. So it's not
Cool.
taking the shortest distance is the straight line and all that, but it's another way to get there.
Well, Tim, I know that you've got a million things going, and man, oh man, like I said, I am intrigued by the whole um, transition, let's call it, to this type of travel and mobility, because I think it's real. And I don't know if you saw it. Tim keeps referring to that Dragon thing. I think that was like 30,000 drones or some crazy number of drones they had up when they were doing those things in the last year. So it's going to be exciting to see. But in respect for your time and in respect for the listeners, I wanted to jump to, because we need to do probably another episode with you after,
Yeah, we do need another episode, Tim.
because
We got to have you back.
I guarantee you this is going to be our most watched episode. And thank you again. But we'll read the book and then come back, and then we'll have a zillion more questions and set aside more time when you're in back in the States. But I want to touch on the three things, because I can kind of guess what your dream car is going to be. It's not going to be on land. But tell us, Tim, real quick. We ask our listeners, our guests, rather, their first car, their favorite car, and then their dream car. So let's touch on your first car. Then we'll end with our wow question that Stan will ask you about.
Okay. The first car, and I was lucky enough to be able to drive a new car as a new driver at 16 years old. But at that time, and that's again dating myself, that was 1972, and I bought a brand new Ford Pinto. And by the way, I survived the Ford Pinto. But at that time, this is going to age me too. But we talked about the price of the TV when the flat screens first came out. But when the Ford Pinto came out, you could buy it at Ford advertised it at 1995. So you can still buy a new car for under $2,000. And I was honored to be able to buy a Ford Pinto. It served me very well. That was my first car. My dream car, I'm going to go ahead and jump the shark here and say my dream car is the flying car, because I really
Yeah.
do think that this is a big part of our future. I want a fully autonomous car too, but I want a flying car because I do think this is a problem solver in so many ways, in time, in emissions, in traffic fatalities, in traffic congestion. It is a problem solver, and I want to be a part of the problem solving. And my first car then would probably be that Jetson One jetpack.
Yeah,
All right,
I'm going to look into that Jetson one.
we skipped over your favorite car. Let's stick with
Oh, my
ice,
favorite
since
car.
we haven't flown yet. Let's
Yeah.
stick with an ice car.
Um, I've become an EV guy, so I really like electric cars. I've had 5 of them already, and plus 2 PHEVs. One that I haven't had, but I really like, and I think it's not it's still a hidden gem that most people don't know. But I think Cadillac and the Cadillac Lyric they're building just an incredible vehicle. I've helped some people get into Cadillac Lyrics, and they love them. So I'll say my dream car right now is a Cadillac Lyric or the Cadillac Escalade EV. So that's a beautiful vehicle too. So
Cool.
props to General Motors on their electric vehicles. They're doing very well. Ford is too, and Kia and Hyundai. I love them all. Subaru, they're all doing really good. But I like the Cadillac right now.
All right, Stan, you
All
want
right.
to wrap it up?
Yeah. So we like to finish things up with our guests, Tim. Carl calls it the wow. It's the words of wisdom. So if you were gonna go back to a young Tim when he's buying that Ford Pinto, or just if you were to give advice to young people that you wish you would have known back then, what would be a piece of advice you would share with people?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, and this is without any forethought. But you know, um, I think we have to trust science and trust the technology. All of these things that I talked about it, that have improved in automotive and now in aviation is driven by science and technology. So I would say trust the science, live the technology, and improve your life, and it will. I'm a believer in that. I'm a true believer in that. So I would go with that.
That is excellent.
Excellent
Excellent.
advice. Yeah, Tim.
Tim, I can't tell you how much fun this has been. Thank you so much for being on here. We would love to have you again because I know that there's a lot more for us to talk about.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's been great, and I know it took us a minute to get this together, and I appreciate your patience and flexibility in doing this from the road, from your hotel room. So thank you, Tim. And more people need to hear this story and buy your book. We'll get the link from you after we wrap this and put it in the description so that many people can enjoy the history of bikes, the flying cars to the Jetson. Man, it's exciting times ahead.
It is. And our best days, this is a Ronald Reagan quote, but from the shining city on the hill, but our best days, I truly believe, are still ahead of us.
I love
Good,
it.
good ending.
All right.
Thanks so much,
Thanks
guys.
everybody for joining us.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Take care.
You guys are
Thanks, Dan.
intuitive, by the way. Very intuitive.
Bye-bye.
Bye.